brought along to prove that I was indeed from Tech. Because in the very beginning he was asked, what was he asked? Harvard or Tech? So he was Tech, means he was from MIT. She stared at the letter, then handed it back to me carefully, gripping it with her fingers as if it were a dinner plate heaped with food instead of a sheet of paper. She did not wear glasses, and I wondered if she had read a word of it. The last boy was always late. Now she is saying, was always late means in paying rent. Still owes me $8. Harvard boys are not what they used to be. That's why in the very beginning she was just asking. In her opinion, negative attitude was the negative opinion about Harvard students, Harvard people who rented her house was there, right? So, only Harvard and Tech in this house, Tech boy. It is very well, the writer is saying. You check the lock? Yes, madam. She slapped the space beside her on the bench with one hand and told me to sit down. For a moment she was silent, then she intoned, as if she alone possessed this knowledge. There's an American flag on the moon. Now she was announcing exactly the same statement as made by the President Nixon. I told you about the landing on the moon by Americans. There is an American flag on the moon. Yes, madam. Until then, I had not thought very much about the moon shot. It was in the newspaper, of course. Article upon articles were published because this was one of the great achievements made by America at that time. The astronauts, because at the time there was a cutthroat competition between America and Russia. At the time, Russia was known as USSR. The astronauts had landed on the shores of the Sea of Tranquility. Tranquility means peace, eternal peace. What does it mean? Sea of Tranquility means before that no human being had dared to step on. That's why it was quite peaceful. I had read, traveling farther than anyone in the history of civilization. For a few hours, they explored the moon's surface, they gathered rocks in their pockets, described their surroundings. She is just mentioning what these astronauts did. A magnificent desolation, according to one astronaut, means no human being lived over there. That's why it was desolate, means there was no sign of human settlement. He spoke by phone to the president and planted a flag in lunar soil. Lunar means related to sun, related to moon. Okay, related to sun is solar, related to moon is lunar. The voyage means journey. The voyage was hailed, welcomed as man's most awesome achievement. I had seen full-page photographs in the globe of the astronauts in their inflated costumes and read about what certain people in Boston had been doing at the exact moment the astronauts landed. On a Sunday afternoon, a man said that he was operating a swan boat with a radio pressed to his ear. A woman had been baking rolls for her grandchildren. Means, in these lines it has been mentioned how the Americans were reacting at this achievement made by their own nation. The woman bellowed, "A flag on the moon, boy! I heard it on the radio. Isn't that splendid? Isn't that splendid?" Means they all were feeling quite happy. Yes, madam. But she was not satisfied with my reply. Instead, she commanded, "Say splendid. Splendid. With zeal and enthusiasm you should say, because this is the achievement made by our nation." I was both baffled, means confused, and somewhat insulted by the request. She was saying I had to repeat, "Say splendid, splendid." So I felt a bit humiliation also. It reminded me of the way I was taught multiplication tables as a child. Actually, I was just a mature man, but I was told to repeat this. So I thought as if I were really a child and I was getting commands by an elderly person, exactly as I used to be in my early childhood when I was supposed to learn tables. 4 1 ja 4. then student was supposed to repeat 4 to the 8 in this way. Okay, repeating after the master. Master means teacher. Setting crossed leg without shoes or pencils on the floor of my one room Tollygun school. Tollygun school, this is the area in Calcutta at the time when he was just a child. The writer was just a child. It also reminded me of my wedding when I had repeated endless Sanskrit verses after the priest. Means when he was getting married, means when the rituals were going on, wedding rituals were going on. So the Panditji, the priest was telling him to do this and telling him to chant this and that. So exactly he was reminded of two things. One, when he was just a child in his school days, and second, when he was getting married. So in the course of during this process, he was just reminded. Okay, I barely understood. Which joined me to my wife. I said nothing. Say splendid. The woman bellowed once again. She shouted, "Are you hard of hearing? I have told you to repeat. Say splendid." Splendid, I murmured. I had to repeat the word a second time at the top of my lungs so she could hear. Maybe she was hard of hearing. I am soft spoken by nature and was specially reluctant, means not willing, to raise my voice to an elderly woman whom I had met only moments ago. Actually, I didn't feel like shouting at the woman, and because she was elderly and for the very first time I was. So our courtesies and ethics did not allow me, because we Indians are not allowed morally, we are not allowed to speak aloud in front of women and elderly people. So I was just following my ethics only. But she did not appear to be offended, means unpleased. So if anything, the reply pleased her, because her next command was, "Go and see the room." I rose from the bench and mounted the narrow carpeted staircase. Stairs were there, so that place of stairs known as staircase, and that was covered with carpet. There were 5 doors, 2 on either side of an equally narrow hallway, and one at the opposite end. Only one door was partly open. The room contained a twin bed under a sloping ceiling, a brown oval rug, a basin with an wash basin with an exposed pipe, and a chest of drawers. Actually, these rooms were not well looked after, because nobody was living there. That's why it shows what these rooms were looking like. One door painted white led to a closet, means almirah type wardrobe was there, another to a toilet and a tub. The walls were covered with grey and ivory made of elephant teeth. Stripped paper, wallpaper was stripped, and the window was open. Net curtains stirred in the breeze. I lifted them away and inspected the view. Means I removed the curtains, and then I had a look at what was looking and what I found outside the window. Okay, a small backyard with a few fruit trees were there and an empty cloth stand. I was satisfied. From the bottom of the stairs, I heard the woman demand, "What is your decision?" Means I was upstairs and she was downstairs. So while being downstairs, she just called out and asked me, "What is your decision?" Means what have you decided, whether you have decided to take up this room or not. When I returned to the foyer, means crossing that corridor, I went downstairs, the place where she was sitting, and told her. She picked up the leather change purse on the table, opened the clasp, fished about with her fingers, and produced a key on a thin wire hoop, keychain. She informed me that there was a kitchen at the back of the house, accessible through the parlor. I was welcome to use the stove as long as I left it as I found it. Sheets and towels were provided, but keeping them clean was my own responsibility. It was my own responsibility to manage all these things provided to me. The rent was due Friday mornings on the ledge above the piano keys. Means that mantelpiece was there, so I was supposed to place the rent on that mantelpiece. above the piano, okay, and no lady visitors were there, means we people were not allowed to bring any female with us. This was one of the strict conditions. I am a married man, madam. It was the first time I had announced this fact to anyone, but she had not heard. In the we already learned that she was hard of hearing, so maybe she had not heard. No lady visitors, she insisted. She did not hear, that's why she is saying. I have said no lady visitor is allowed here. She introduced herself as Mrs. Kraft. You can call me Mrs. Kraft. I am Lady Mrs. Kraft. My wife's name was Mala. The marriage had been arranged by my older brother and his wife. Why? Because at the time ethics were there that we were not allowed to settle our own life partner, find our own life partner, unlike today. Okay, so at the time elderly people, parents or elder brother used to find out the life partners for us. So the marriage had been arranged by my old brother and his wife, means my sister-in-law. I regarded the position with neither objection nor enthusiasm. It was a duty expected of me as it was expected of every man at the time in the 60s. She was the daughter of a school teacher at Balaghat, who Mala. Okay, I was told that she could cook, not embroider, sketch landscapes and recite poems by Tagore. At the time, whenever life partner was to be selected, these elderly people used to ask, you know cooking, you know sewing, you know embroidery, like this. So he is telling what attributes were there in Mala's personality. But these talents could not make up for the fact that she did not possess a fair complexion, and so a string of men had rejected her to her face. Actually, she had been rejected by so many people because of her complexion. She was 27, I was 36 and she was 27, an age when her parents had begun to fear that she would never marry, and so they were willing to ship their only child halfway across the world in order to save her from spinsterhood. Spinsterhood, students, this is this is the time period of one's life when women remain unmarried. Women, I am not saying girl. If girl is remain single, she is known as unmarried. But when a woman is there, so she is known as a spinster. So her lifetime is known as spinsterhood. Means her parents did not want her to remain unmarried throughout her lifetime, and she was 27 at that time. For 5 nights we shared a bed, means he enjoyed his marriage. Each of those nights, after applying cold cream and braiding her hair, which she tied up at the end with a black cotton string, she turned from me and wept. She missed her parents, although I would be leaving the country in a few days. Actually, this is the introduction, and in this way, this in a very natural way, the writer is depicting each and everything. That's why this chapter comes closer to us to understand. Custom dictated that she was now a part of my household, not her parents. And for the next 6 weeks, she was to live with my brother and his wife, cooking, cleaning, serving tea and sweets to guests. In this household chorus, these are, because I was to leave for America for 6 weeks. It has been mentioned. Students, please mind it. 6 weeks means 1.5 months. I did nothing to console her. I lay on my own side of the bed, reading my guidebook by flashlight and anticipating my journey. I was expecting positively. Okay, at times I thought of the tiny room, small room on the other side of the wall, which had belonged to my mother. Now the room was practically empty. The wooden pallet on which she had once slept was piled with trunks and old beddings. Nearly 6 years ago, before leaving for London, means in 1964, in the very beginning, it has been given in 1964, he left for London. Okay, I had watched her die on that bed, had found her playing with her excrement in her final days. Before we cremated her, I had cleaned each of her fingernails with a hairpin, and then because my brother could not bear it. Actually, my elder brother could not tolerate all these things. That's why, being close to my mother, I had to perform all these duties. I used to clean her. I had assumed the role of an eldest son and had touched the flame to her temple to release her tormented soul to heaven. The next morning, I moved into the room in Mrs. Croft's house when I unlocked. Now, he is coming back to the reality current time. So, he is saying, I moved into the room in Mrs. Croft's house. When I unlocked the door, I saw that she was sitting on the piano bench on the same side as the previous evening. When first time he met, one evening before, so she wore the same black skirt, the same stars white blouse, and had her hands folded together the same way in her lap. She looked as much the same that I wondered if she had spent the whole night on the bench. Exactly in the same way I found her once again at the same place sitting. So I thought she might not have moved from that place since previous evening. I put my suitcase upstairs, filled my flask with boiling water in the kitchen, and headed off to work. That evening when I came home from the university, she was still there. Shocking. And sit down, boy. She slapped the space beside her in this way. Sit down. Yeah, sit down here. I paused. I sat beside her on the bench. I had a bag of groceries with me. Now I had made some petty shopping. Okay, more milk, more cornflakes, and more bananas. Because my inspection of the kitchen earlier in the day had disclosed that no spare pots, pans, or cooking utensils, means cooking pots were there, means nothing. So I had to buy each and everything. There were only 2 saucepans in the refrigerator, both containing some orange broth. Broth means a kind of greasy liquid when we prepare some curries, okay, that is known as shorba, okay, broth, and a copper kettle on the stove. Good evening, madam. She asked me if I had checked the lock. I told her, yeah, I have. So I told her that I had already checked the door, it was properly locked. For a moment she was silent, then suddenly she declared with equal measures of disbelief and delight as the night before, "There's an American flag on the moon, boys." Yes, madam. Once again she was repeating. "A flag on the moon, isn't that splendid?" I noted, dreading what I knew was coming. "Yes, madam." "Say splendid." This time I paused, looking to either side in case anyone were there to overhear me. I just wanted somebody to tell her that I was already speaking, but she was somehow hard of hearing. So though I knew perfectly well that the house was empty, I knew nobody was there other than me and that elder woman. I felt like an idiot, but it was a small enough thing to ask. "Splendid," I cried out. "Splendid!" In this way I just cried out. So that she might hear me. I just wanted to make her hear me. Within days it became our routine, and somehow the writer became friendly with the woman. In the mornings when I left for the library, Mrs. Croft was either hidden away in her bedroom or the other side of the staircase, or she was sitting on the bench oblivious to my presence, means unaware of my presence, listening to the news or classical music on the radio. But each evening when I returned, the same thing happened. She slapped the bench, ordered me to sit down, declared that there was a flag on the moon. An eccentric type, a crazy type woman was there, and generally students in old age, it just happens, and declared that it was splendid. I said it was splendid too, and then we sat in silence, as occurred as it was, as strange as it was, and as endless as it felt to me then. The nightly encounter lasted only about 10 minutes. Inevitably, means unavoidably, she would drift off to sleep, and just after that she was to go to her bed, her head falling abruptly toward her chest, leaving me free to retire to my room. Then she, by gestures, she used to say, "Now you may go back to your room." By then, of course, there was no flag on the moon. The astronauts, I had read in the paper, had taken it down from flying back to Earth. Those astronauts had already got back on the Earth, but she still kept on speaking the same thing. But I did not have the heart to tell her. One Friday morning, when my first week's rent was due, I went to the piano in the parlor to place my money on the ledge. That mantelpiece means upper side of the piano where he was supposed to keep the money as house rent. The piano keys were dull and discolored. You know piano keys? Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da. In this way, some keys are there. So here he is saying keys were dull and discolored. When I pressed one, it made a sound at all. I had put $1 bills in an envelope and written Mrs. Croft's name on the front of it. I was not in the habit of leaving money unmarked and unattended. From where I stood, I could see the profile of her tent-shaped skirt. She was sitting on the bench listening to the radio. It seemed unnecessary to make her get up and walk all the way to the piano. Actually, I did not want to bother her. I thought she would just stand up from her chair, then she would go to the piano, she would collect the rent. It may bother her, so I thought it better to place it in her hand. I never saw her walking about and assumed from the cane always propped against the round table at her side that she did so. Cane was there, a staff was there that could support old people, right? With difficulty, when I approached the bench, she peered up at me and demanded, "What is your business? What do you do? What is your occupation? And why have you come here? What do you want?" I said, "Madam, I have come to give you rent." "The rent, madam, on the ledge above the piano keys," she said. "Keep it over there." "I have it here." I extended the envelope toward her. "Ma'am, I have just brought it, so please receive it." But her fingers folded together in a lap did not budge, means move. I bowed slightly and lowered the envelope so that it hovered just above her hands. After a moment, she accepted and nodded her head. Okay, in this way. She didn't say, but she just nodded her head in agreement. That night, when I came home, she did not slap the bench, but out of habit, I sat beside her as usual. It had become our custom every day. So, without waiting for her instruction to sit over there, I just went and sat beside her. She asked me if I had checked the lock, but she mentioned nothing about the flag on the moon. Now she was not repeating the same thing about the flag. Instead, she said, "It was very kind of you." Actually, students, she was highly impressed by the way I gave her rent, unlike other people previously. "I beg your pardon." "Excuse me, ma'am, I didn't get." "Very kind of you. You are so nice." She was still holding the envelope in her hand because she had never expected that she would be given this much respect. On Sunday, there was a knock on my door. Actually, Sunday being holiday, I was at my home only, so you can see an elderly woman introduced herself. She was Mrs. Croft's daughter, Helen. Her name was Helen, and she walked into the room and looked at each of the walls as if the signs of change, glancing at the shirts that hung on the closet, the neckties draped over the doorknob. In this way, we move the doorknob just to open the door, right? So she entered. The box of the cornflakes on the chest of drawers, the dirty bowl and spoon in the basin. She was short and thick-waisted with cropped silver hair and bright pink lipstick. She wore a sleeveless summer dress, a row of white plastic beads and spectacles. It is the appearance how she looked like, means her daughter, Helen. Okay, on a chain that hung like a swing against her chest. The backs of her legs were mapped with dark blue veins and her upper arms says like the flesh of a roasted eggplant. She told me she lived in Ellington, a town farther up Massachusetts Avenue where I was working. I come once a week to bring my mother groceries. She said that she is not able to go out. That's why every week I just happen to be here with groceries she requires. Has she sent you packing yet? It is very well, madam. Some of the boys run screaming, but I think she likes you. You are the first boarder, means you are the first tenant she has ever referred to as a gentleman. You know, my mother was calling you a gentleman. She was highly pleased with you. Not at all, madam. She looked at me, noticing my bare feet. Okay, bare feet. I still felt strange wearing shoes indoors and always removed them before entering my room. Are you new to Boston? New, actually, ma'am, not only Boston. This is my first time I have come to America. Oh, from where? From means from where are you? She raised her eyebrows. I am from Calcutta, India. I am an Indian. Is that right? We had a Brazilian fellow about a year ago. You will find Cambridge a very international city. I nodded and began to wonder how long our conversation would last. But at that moment, we heard Mrs. Croft's electrifying voice rising up the stairs. When we stepped into the hallway, we heard the hollering. You are to come downstairs immediately. She was just shouting. What is it? Helen hollered back. What happened? I said immediately, you are supposed to come down. Come down. She was giving instruction to her daughter. I put on my shoes at once. Helen sighed. She had a deep breath. We walked down the staircase. It was too narrow for us to descend side by side. So I followed Helen. First she went downstairs, then I followed, and who seemed to be in no hurry and complained at one point that she had a bad knee. Have you been walking without your cane? Helen called out. What happened? You were walking without a cane. She paused, resting her hand on the banister and looked back at me. She slipped sometimes. For the first time, Mrs. Croft seemed vulnerable, very weak. I pictured her on the floor in front of the bench, flat on her, staring at the ceiling, her feet pointing in opposite directions. But when we reached the bottom of the staircase, she was sitting there as usual, her hands folded together in her lap. 2 grocery bags were at her feet. When we stood before her, she did not slap the bench and ask us to sit down. She glared. What is it, mother? It is improper. What is improper? It is improper for a lady and gentleman who are not married to one another to hold a private conversation without a chaperone. How is it possible? You were talking to this man, you are not married to this man, and you are talking? This is not proper. This is improper. Helen said she was 68 years old. Enough to be my mother. But Mrs. Croft insisted that Helen and I speak to each other downstairs in the parlor. She added that it was also improper for a lady of Helen's status to reveal her age and to wear a dress so high above the ankle, short skirt. For your information, mother, it is 1969. What would you do if you actually left the house one day and saw a girl in a miniskirt? You are saying that I am wearing short skirt, then one day suppose you happen to go out in the market and you come across a woman who is wearing short skirt or miniskirt, how would you react? Madam, this is 1969.